races.
85% of how many did you plan?
These are in the fall, 20, so 17 out of 20. Now I'm counting the Florida Senate as a win, so I know that's still being recounted. But we did very well. Our candidates did well. One of the lessons I took away from this was, for Republicans, if you ran away from core Republican principles, you didn't talk about the tax cuts, you didn't talk about the need for more freedom and free markets, you ran into trouble because your Democrat opponent defined the issues in the election. Our guys, they stood by their principles and they did well.
A day after the election, you talked about squishy Republicans. Define squishy.
I think it's people who want the office more than they care about the principles, and so they give lip service to, we're for conservative principles, we're for freedom, but then when it comes down to really tough votes, am I going to vote for or against the tax cut measure? Am I going to stand up for really changing and fixing the health care problem? Am I going to stand up and say no for excess spending? The squishy ones say, no, that's too hard. I don't want to do that. I want to find a place to run and hide.
A couple other members that lost, though, last week. Dave Brat of Virginia, Rob Bloom of Iowa. Would you define these folks as squishy?
No.
So what happened in their elections?
I think it was cases where there was such a closely divided district. Dave Brat fought hard. We spent a significant amount of money, about $500,000 on independent expenditures to help him. And he just got outspent. His Democrat opponent was on media here in Washington, D.C. that just touched a sliver of the district. That was too expensive for us to spend money on and for him.
Dave McIntosh, the Club for Growth, with us until about 8:45 this morning. If you want to join the conversation, phone lines as usual. Democrats 202-748-8000, Republicans 202-748-8001, Independents 202-748-8002. Let's look forward a little bit. Republican leadership elections in the House are taking place this week and today and tomorrow. What did Republican voters signal that they want from Republican leaders?
I think they want to see a change. I think they want to see a change in the House in terms of supporting President Trump's agenda, is be the way most of the voters would express it. But it essentially means they want to see leadership there that will fight for those proposals. Paul Ryan will say, well, we passed them all and then send them over to the Senate. But when you're Speaker of the House, you have to sign off on the final bill, and he always caved to whatever the Senate came up with. And they don't want to see that. They want to see somebody who's really ready to get in there and fight for it. At this point, what they need is somebody who understands, how do we come back from the minority? And you can't do that by cutting deals or playing small ball politics, on these little things that the voters actually don't really pay attention to. It looks to me like they're on the path to doing more of the same, which as Einstein defined as insanity, if you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
Why is that? Because Kevin McCarthy is expected to have the
It looks like
track?
He's going to be the inside favorite for being that majority leader, and he's been right there at the table part of the last two leadership in the House, where the Republican base has been enormously frustrated.
Where does Jim Jordan end up in all this? He's challenging Kevin McCarthy.
He is, and Jim is a fighter. I think Jim would make a great minority leader, and what I think he'll end up doing is, depending on whether he wins or loses, if he wins, he'll be able to lead the caucus, I think, back to a majority as soon as the next election. If they don't choose him, Jim's a team player in the end, so I think what he'll do is follow the current path he's been on and go to the public with the values and show there are Republicans up there with a fight in them.
What about the Senate? Do you think Mitch McConnell should remain majority leader?
I do. Mitch had a much better year. Many of the problems were in the Senate, and if you talk to him or others, they say, well, we had a one-vote majority. We couldn't do a lot of things because one or two people would object. He'll have a better majority. Hopefully it'll be up to 52. And that will make it easier for him. The problem for McConnell is the appropriations process. And I've heard him brag about, we ran a wonderful appropriations process. The real problem with the appropriations under Republicans was the deficit spending. Every poll that we took showed that was a number one or number two concern among Republican voters. And you've got almost three parties, Republican, Democrat, and appropriators in Congress. And the leadership in the Senate squarely sides with the appropriator party. And the House did nothing under Paul Ryan to counter that. That's one of the sources really of frustration. The Republican voters saw government grow with this Congress and wanted to see a change.
David McIntosh, former member of the House from Indiana from 1995 to 2001. How long have you been president of the Club for Growth?
This is my fourth year, so 2 election cycles.
And for folks who don't know the Club for Growth, what is it?
Yeah, thank you. We are a free market, small government political group. We're organized as a not-profit to advocate for positions, but the main way we do that is through our political groups, our PAC and Super PAC, to elect champions for limited government, free markets. Our view is that most problems can be solved in private society, and that when you have economic growth, a lot of other problems end up being easier to solve and fall away. So we look for Republican candidates who not only say that, but you can tell from their life and their voting records in the past, their experience, they'll stand up and they'll fight for it.
We'll talk a bit more about how you go about doing that, but let you chat with some callers first. David, Treasure Island, Florida, Republican, you're up first.
Yes, what happened in Florida? Why weren't these corrupt election officials done away with? I mean, Rick Scott has been here for like 8 years, and Pam Bundy, you know, I called her office on Friday, and they had a long weekend. They took the weekend off. You know, this is just ridiculous.
David McIntosh, what happened in Florida?
And we're seeing a repeat of 2000 all over again. I was talking to a friend of mine from Florida who said in those counties, had Rick Scott removed the person who was there, the corruption is endemic, and so it would have just bubbled up under whoever he replaced them with. So at least at this point, he's dealing with people that he knows are not on his side and not the kind of dark underbelly in the process that is willing to cheat and steal elections.
Do you think that's what's happening in Florida right now?
From the fact that they mixed all of the votes, the ones that should have been kept separate and dealt with all together as a way of making sure that votes, many of them invalid votes, were counted anyway, yeah, I think that's an effort to try to steal the election.
To California, Jim, Santa Cruz, go ahead.
Hey, how you doing? I was calling about all the corruption, and everybody's complaining about this and that, and it's unbelievable. And that $20 trillion in 8 years that Obama took in for taxes is gone. And then where did that go to? The infrastructure. Everything's in shambles. And not to mention Gaddafi's gold and just everything. And then on top of that, they didn't have $1 trillion deficit.
David McIntosh, debt and deficit right now, and how big of an issue that is for this Congress.
As I was sharing with you, as we talked to voters throughout the last 6 months, it was a top issue, either number 1 or number 2 in Republicans, but across the board, Democrats and independents. This Congress has failed utterly to address that. They keep spending more. They don't want to do it. They've removed the restrictions that were there to try to limit the growth of spending, and they think there's no political price for that. In the end, the countries can't survive this type of growing debt. We're not yet at that tipping point, but the experts will always warn you right now, we're getting close. We need to do something about and have fiscal restraint.
Did you think that would happen in a Republican-controlled House, Republican-controlled Senate, and with the president, the White House being Republican-controlled as well, coming in to this 115th Congress?
Yeah, no. Mick Mulvaney was the head of the OMB for President Trump, and he put forth a tremendously insightful budget that started to whittle away at the waste and reduce the spending where they could. And it was ignored by everybody, it appears, and Congress just went about its habits that had been inherited from Democrats, Republicans. As I say, appropriators are kind of a group unto themselves. They